Alright, Wildcats, here we are on day 4 of Phase 2. We're already done with Phase 1 taking our notes. Now we're going to actually use our yellow highlighter to highlight and process our notes. So you need your yellow highlighter, you might want your colored pens, and you might want your pencil. Okay? The whole point of processing is to support the main idea with supporting details. So let's look at our main idea, or essential question. Water runs downhill equals powerful force. Arrow changes landscape. Rivers erode, zoop, change course, zoop, flood, arrow, continuous pattern. So if we were to say that in a sentence, we'd say, water runs downhill, and that is a powerful force that can change the landscape. Rivers erode, change course, and flood in a continuous pattern. Okay, let's look through our notes and let's find things that support that main idea. Okay, first up is always our vocabulary, right? Alluvial fan. It's a fan-shaped landform where water rushes quickly downhill and then spreads out when it gets slow in the flat areas. Okay, that is going to be related to water running downhill, being a powerful force, and changing landscape. So I'm going to take my highlighter and highlight alluvial fan. Okay. Delta, low plain, river, ocean. Well, deltas are another major landform that happen from all the runoff. So I'm going to highlight delta because that is a major type of landform. Deposition, drop sediment, erode, deposit. So deposition is when sediment gets dropped after it has been eroded. I'm sure that we're going to use that vocabulary term when we talk about our main idea. Meanders, those are when there's a wide flat region, a river starts winding in curves. We're probably going to talk about meanders and rivers, about how the meanders cause the water to speed up on the outside and erode more away, but they slow down on the inside and deposit sediment, and that's how we form the Oxbow lakes. So I'm going to highlight meanders. Tributaries, those are the streams and creeks that come together to form larger rivers. We might use that word, tributaries, because that helps us understand how small amounts of water up in the hills and mountains can all come together and collect to form a much larger, much faster, and much more powerful river. Okay, let's go ahead and highlight tributaries. We might be using that word. All right, let's look at this section, how rivers form. If we could only choose one or two things from that section supporting our main idea, what would it be? Okay, so looking at the title of this section, How Rivers Form, how would we answer that question? How do rivers form? Rivers begin in mountains or hills as tributaries that form a river. Okay, now, looking at our main idea, notice how they talk about running downhill, the powerful force that changes landscapes, they erode. So there's a lot about weathering and erosion, getting wider and deeper over time. Okay, so let's go ahead and use that. Weathering, erosion, wider, deeper over time. So our sentence for this section might sound something like, rivers form by beginning in mountains and hills as tributaries that collect to form a larger river, period. They weather and erode the land, making it wider and deeper over time. Okay, looking at the section for deposition and thinking about our main idea, what is the most important thing we have here? Constructive force equals build up. Yes, that's important, but I think this is even more important. And remember, that we got from our visual summary. So if it's in one of these three pictures, that means it's super important, right? Okay, up here they talked about weathering and erosion. We highlighted that in how rivers form. So here in deposition, they talked about picking up and carrying sediment from one place, depositing in another. Guess what? That is what's super important. So deposition is when a river picks up sediment in one place and deposits it in another. And that kind of covers the entire idea of what's going on with rivers. So I think we just learned something, right? When we're going through and doing phase 2 processing, we have to talk to each other like we're doing right now in this video, but we also should look at our visual summary. This is a very helpful place to find the most important thing. Okay, let's look at the last section. Okay, let's look at the mini section about meanders and Oxbow lakes. All right, so these were mini sections, and this was a mini section. And if we try to write something about both, it's going to get really long really fast. But what is important and what is common between all of this? All of this involves weathering. Okay, we already have that. All of this involves erosion. We already have that. How does the weathering and erosion happen? Remember we talked about how important it is, slow versus fast? That was the answer to one of our main idea questions here. What determines where deposition occurs? So for this section, we're going to highlight slow versus fast. And we're going to say something like, deposition occurs depending on how slow or how fast the water is moving. And then we can say when the water is moving fast, it is eroding and picking up sediment. But when it slows down, it deposits that sediment somewhere else. That supports what we just highlighted, pick up in one place, deposit in another. So it kind of keeps this idea of deposition and expands on it a little bit more about how that happens. Okay, now let's down here look at flood. Floods. Okay, what do they have in the visual summary? Affects a lot of things, destroys habitat, alters the landscape. Landscape and landforms are very big ideas. That's the entire lesson, the entire chapter. So what do we have about landforms and landscapes? Let's see. Alters landscape. Okay, and let's go back and look at our main idea. Does that support this? Eroding, changing course, and flooding. Does that sound like changing the landscape? Water runs downhill and a powerful force changes the landscape. So what we just highlighted is in our visual summary and supports our main idea. Okay, so now we're going to try to use our vocabulary words to form a paragraph, and we're going to use these supporting details. Okay, let's do the main idea. We're going to talk our way through it. Water running downhill is a powerful force in changing Earth's landscape. Rivers erode, move sediment, change course, and flood their banks in a continuous pattern. So remember, we literally copy the main idea into our summary paragraph, into our e-binder. Okay, now let's talk some more. Rivers form when they begin in mountains or hills as smaller streams or quote-unquote tributaries, period. See, we just used one of those words. As they collect, they become a larger river, period. The rivers weather and erode the land, comma, making it wider and deeper over time, period. Okay, so we used all those terms. Let's see, what would our next sentence be? Oh, here we go. As the rivers move, comma, they pick up sediment in one place and deposit it in another, period. So now we just got our deposition. Okay. Let's see. We didn't use meanders, we didn't use alluvial fans, and we didn't use deltas yet. Okay, let's think about this. Oh, okay. Let's talk about this, but give an example. So we're going to say, for example, zoop, alluvial fans, zoop, deltas, zoop, and meanders all involve picking up sediment in one place and depositing it in another. Okay, so now we got all of our vocabulary terms in, and we still used the things that we highlighted in Phase 2 processing. All right, let's talk about the slow versus fast. When a river or water is moving fast, zoop, it is eroding and picking up sediment, but when it slows down, zoop, it deposits that sediment, Okay, so that's what we would add to those. And then the last part, flooding is a very important agent of change because it can alter the landscape and create new landforms. All right, so that is an example of what we would do. You use your vocabulary terms, you use the things that you highlighted, and you try to make a paragraph. Copy the main idea directly out of the book, and then you start making sentences out of the stuff that you highlighted, and you try to use your vocabulary terms wherever they fit in. So it's going to be something where you're going to have to copy, you're going to have to do some rough drafting to write some things, and then you're going to have to go back and revise and edit it to make it shorter, to make it more concise, to fit things together better. So there's definitely a process to doing this. But we just talked through the process, and now you'll understand how the paragraphs that are showing up in our e-binders come to exist. Okay, good job persevering with the growth mindset, and roar Wildcats!